Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this special edition of Tech Talk. Today, my guest is Dr. John Georges, the Senior Vice President for Academic Operations and still a professor in six, too.
So, I have tenure, they can't get rid of me.
Yeah. John, thanks for being with us today. And first of all, I apologize for not being able to make this on the regularly scheduled time. Difficulties, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
So, but thanks again for coming back and spending some time with us. We've got our local audience here, the usual suspects we've gathered up around Building 54. Thank you guys for being here. And of course, we've got a good number of folks on the TV, as they say. So, John, tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you find yourself in this new role that you've been in? And what's a little bit about the journey so people can get to know you a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Happy to share it. First of all, let me express my disappointment that you didn't say welcome to In Between Two Ferns. I was really kind of looking forward to that one. But yeah, hi, everyone. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. It's good to see some familiar faces that I haven't seen in a while, some of them even in person. So yeah, happy to be here. Thank you, Steve, for inviting me. So yeah, Steve shared, I'm currently serving as Senior Vice Provost. I appreciate the promotion. Senior Vice Provost for Academic Operations. I've been in the Provost office for about 3 years now. Rounding the bend on 3 various prior administrative roles, including just plain Vice Provost, no seniorness attached to it. I still think it's a play on me going grayer.
Factor, John. Yeah.
Thank you. And served as interim dean, interim associate dean, and the various unit level leadership roles. But really, I started in NAU in 2008 as a fresh out of graduate school assistant professor in computer science, where I had a lot of fun, hopefully did some good work. And I'm sorry I have to do it. And met some of you out there in Zoom land. So it's good to see some familiar names out there from the my old teaching days, I suppose.
Well, John and I have the opportunity to, intermingle in various conversations around the university. So, I think, and many of us are probably familiar with some of the things that are going on, particularly around the Canvas initiative, which you and Dan, who's here in the audience with us, have been really in the forefront of. I know Don's online with us, joining us too. And so we've got quite a bit of expertise in the room around that. But gosh, there seems like there's some other technological things that are disrupting the academy from an instructional standpoint, including things like, ChatGPT and all this kind of stuff's come out. So, John, let me just have you talk a little bit about, what do you see as being really interesting now and probably going into the future around instructional technologies and things that we're using in the academy for teaching and learning?
Sure. Yeah. I'm really surprised ChatGPT came up, Steve. Sorry. And for the LMS effort, this is a rare public venue opportunity to make sure Don and Dan have been carrying the load on that project. Thank you so much, guys. You've been making everyone, including me, look good. So I appreciate that. I think, I'll focus on just generative AI for just a second.
Sure.
There's certainly a lot of conversation in the academic circles about, what does it mean? Of course, all of the usual, what I call level 0 conversations, which really are focused on, oh my gosh, how do we detect use of these technologies? Which of course is tricky and current solutions aren't very good at, which is interesting. So I don't know if y'all, anybody read it out there? All right, thank you. Somebody ran, I think, the Declaration of Independence through one of the currently available detectors, and it came back as 78% AI generated. So obviously a little bit of work to do on that level 0, thinking about how do we detect and I'll just call it, how do we detect unsanctioned use? Because I think as we very quickly need to move forward past this notion of just treating it as a prohibited technology, because it's not going to be a prohibited technology. It already enjoys, and forerunners of technologies like ChatGPT have enjoyed professional use and will continue to enjoy professional use. I think our conversation internally, but also more broadly, I think, is very quickly shifting to more sophisticated and nuanced approaches to these kinds of technologies. So certainly, how do we use technologies in the classroom as part of the instructional enterprise to improve student learning and help them along that educational journey. So, for example, a lot of good conversations with English faculty where the notion of the first rough draft is gone, right? The first rough drafts, these are going to be AI generated moving forward. So how do we prepare ourselves as an academy for a world, or to be in a world that uses these technologies as part of what we do? And then more broadly, thinking about what our students are going to be doing afterwards with their degree once they finish here with us, is how do we prepare students to actually use these technologies in the professional context? And that's, certainly some of the easy things around, preparing them for professional use, preparing them for a workplace where these tools, again, already have had and will continue to have penetration. But then also some hard thinking. I mean, this might be a premature assertion, but early assessments seem to suggest that the professional landscape is going to be disrupted. So what kinds of jobs are there going to be out there in a world where these technologies exist? And I'll pick, for example, and at least what's emerged on my radar most strongly, but, a paralegal. A lot of what a paralegal does is prepare early drafts for more thorough review by lawyers. And that has emerged as a profession that is likely to be significantly disrupted. So taking a step back and thinking about us as a university, well, what does that mean about our portfolio of academic programs? Are there things that we're offering today that prepare students for a profession that will simply no longer exist in years from now? And is our current academic portfolio well suited for preparing students for the types of new professional opportunities that might emerge? So, and of course, the pace of change on academic portfolios is very, very slow. So we're already behind the 8 ball, so to speak. It takes us years to spin up a new degree program. So we need to start thinking about that sooner rather than later. So I'll say for me personally, it's revolutionized how I do email. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I don't send emails that are ChatGPT generated.
Why not?
Because I'm looking for the easy button in my Outlook, Steve, that maybe a hardworking ITS team can make happen for me. A model that's been trained on my email so that it reflects, hopefully, the knowledge captured in it. And I could just click reply. And
The perfect reply.
The correct, the eloquently and rhetorically flourished reply. Yeah, so I'm waiting for that update on Outlook.
Yeah, and I think Don Carter's often we've conversed often about that old Sam Clemens statement that I didn't have the time to write you a short email, so I wrote you a long one instead, right? And so, I think it's kind of exciting though, because I see, beyond the academy, like from a research standpoint. So a machine learning environment that's, ingested all of the scientific data around cancer treatments and things like that, and the ability to boil that down daily and in near real time to inform scientists about new methods and new capabilities and new science that's making its way into, real time virus fighting, all kinds of things that came out of the pandemic just kind of kicked that thing down the road much, much faster. and what kinds of implications that will have in terms of research, discovery, and then, of course, in the graduate programs and then eventually in the undergraduate programs. So it is exciting. It's a little scary at the same time, right? Because the other side of that coin is, how are we going to tell when we're being deep faked from a generative standpoint?
And if I can add, there's, since we're talking about disruption and the notion of, the changing landscape of the profession, we as an academy are also not immune, right? So Chegg, for example, I think just a few days ago, released some early planning around generative AI-based tutoring. So, how distant are we? Sorry, so let me take a step back. A lot of what we do in the undergraduate space is really help students learn content that is well established. And that's a lot of our faculty spend a lot of their time in that exercise. So, how distant are we from a world where the faculty, at least at the undergraduate level, is replaced by technology that can interactively, in an adaptive way, perhaps building on some of the adaptive learning work that's been around for a long time. But thinking through assessing, what does a student know? What do they not know? Where the holes are? What are the conceptual links they're missing? I think, again, not to, I actually am an ed tech skeptic in many, many ways. But, I think this could be an inflection point where even the notion of the academic as a profession is going to start becoming eroded.
Yeah, you get disrupted anyway. And for me, when I think about that, because it's not a far leap given what we know about adaptive technologies, pedagogical advancements, and machine learning AI types of capabilities in a chatbot, for example. It underscores the humanity of what it means to be a faculty member in front of a class, right? And the really important aspects of that. How do you connect with students? How do you guide them and help them explore things as opposed to just getting up and reading lecture notes and regurgitating what's in the book that they should have read but maybe didn't?
Yep.
So in some ways, the technology amplifies the humanity in it for us, I think. And that's what's exciting to me, I think, as it disrupts other kinds of things, it gives us pause to think about, what does it really mean to be a teacher, a tutor, and some of these other roles that, people might be afraid, of AI going too far.
I think there's certainly that fear. And if I can amplify that point, because there's also been a lot of conversation. Well, okay, if the bleak vision that perhaps I foreshadowed in my comments of AIU, I'm coining it here just for future reference, AIU. In a world where that's how instruction is delivered, then what is the space for institutions like ours? And of course, exactly as you suggested, one of the early assertions is, well, learning doesn't happen in a vacuum. Learning happens in a human context. Learning happens in a social context. Right. And when our students actually, even today, even though a big part of what we do is help them learn and transmit knowledge, so to speak, a lot of what we also do is provide them with a support infrastructure that best positions them so that they're ready to take on that knowledge. And I think technology isn't nearly as good as humans at creating that necessary precondition and foundation for learning. Yeah. So, but what does that mean? Because our faculty, largely speaking, and I'll just speak for the faculty, they're not prepared to do that kind of work, or they're certainly not prepared to do that kind of work as effectively as they could be. So what it means to be a faculty is going to change. And of course, what it means to be prepared as a faculty is going to change. Amplifying problems, I'll admit I had very little formal training before being given a classroom of my own at the university level, right? So, gosh, if we can't prepare faculty to transmit knowledge and we don't do that well, how much less well are we doing in preparing faculty to be supportive, to be understanding, to be compassionate, to be human, to support students in the life perturbations that knock them off course.
Well, it's a fascinating conversation. And, I don't think it's going to be decades before we see the impact. It's happening, I think, right?
Now I'm more worried than I was before, Steve.
That's why I'm here, is to worry you, John. So, we've got some other technologies, maybe less exciting. I don't know, kind of depends on your point of view. Where, as you mentioned, we're bringing forth this whole new kind of ecosystem, a learning management system. And let me get you just to kind of reflect on that for a minute. Despite all these kind of grand ideas about AI and everything, right? We come back to this fundamental tool, the learning management system, something that nearly every faculty member uses. Certainly, probably, short of maybe course registrations and student accounts receivable, the most important information system that we probably operate in the university. So let me just, what are your reflections on what's about to happen this fall, the future of the LMS, what our aspirations are for innovation around that, and adaptation in this context of teaching and learning?
That's a big space. So I'll just share top of mind. So I think, first of all, we're from an operational perspective, and that's my current bias at least. I think we're very well positioned to roll into fall. I think, of course, this will be disruptive to faculty work. So I think we're already hearing a lot of conversations about just the labor intensiveness of transitioning to an LMS, but I think we're working through all of that. Moving forward, I absolutely agree. I think the LMS is a central part of the student experience, central part of the educational mission, and in many ways it's underutilized. So top of mind for me in this space would be, how do we better use the information contained in the LMS to do us non-LMS-y work? So a lot of conversations today about student retention, for example, and thinking about, again, just as a specific example, how do we build better early awareness of a student that is doing well and on track, or a student that is doing less well off track, and most importantly for us as an institution, needs support, needs help. And we might not know exactly what that help will be, and we probably will never know exactly what help they'll need unless we talk to them. But just taking a step back and being able to build the operational awareness of who these students are is a big challenge that I guess we're struggling to wrap our heads around. But we know, for example, that if we think about quantitative indicators, LMS engagement is much like attendance, which we were talking about the other day. It's a powerful indicator, right? A student that is disengaged with the LMS, at least if they're in a course where the LMS is heavily used, that is an early indicator that something may not be going right for that student's experience. In the same way that a student that stops showing up to class tells you something. And again, generally speaking, we don't do nearly as good of a job as we could be doing in using those early indicators and being able to use them as triggers for outreach so that we can connect with the student, identify what they need, and try to provide it for them to get them back on track. So I think that's one example where we could be doing a better job just using the LMS, but also other data systems, I'm sure, around the institution. Pull out the indicators that are already there and compose them in a situational awareness type of solution to drive our operations. And I think that's a key, both efficiency and effectiveness functionality. So, for example, a lot of conversation with our student affairs staff, for example, who, how do they do outreach to try to find students that might be struggling? They use some data-informed notions, but again, they're not very good. And then they'll blast out an email. And of course, to nobody's surprise, we know that a good third of the students don't even open said emails. And of course, there's a hypothesis that the students that don't open the emails, that probably has a strong overlap with the population that would benefit from support the most. So it's a terrible way to reach the students that you most need to reach.
Yeah, right.
So how do we get better, and how do we improve our game, so to speak, in using technology for that operational work? So I think that's going to be a big emphasis moving forward. I think the LMS has a part of it. There's also, of course, intersections with the academy, right? Yesterday, for example, we spent a good half an hour talking about the notion of early and often in terms of feedback to students, and perhaps the antiquated notion of a midterm grade. What does that mean? And by the time the students get their midterm grade, it's week 11 in a 15-week term. It's way too late to actually build actionable interventions that will have impact.
I did some research at a prior institution, and we could predict with about 80% accuracy whether or not a student would, what grade a student would get actually in that course, both undergraduate and graduate level. And it was based on engagement and testing feedback and on a number, not a huge number of indicators, but so it can be done.
Yep.
And we could do that as early as the second week, where we had a formative assessment, that the student had to take and compare to other leaders, if you will.
Yep.
So yeah, it's an exciting thing. And I think we're on track to do more of that based on, our planning, and we'll see how it goes.
And it's going to take partnership, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, again, if only because for some former students out there, I still, this is so vivid in my memory, but, thinking about curricular structure, the first time I taught a programming languages course, which is one of those very theory heavy, project heavy types of courses. And I still remember like the established pattern at that time was most of the students' grade was determined by one assignment, and it was a 6-week assignment. So you got the assignment, 6 weeks later, you turned in one deliverable. And of course, no offense, but students sometimes tend to wait until the last minute to begin assignments. And it was the simplest intervention of the world. Take the 6-week assignment, break it out into chunks, and ask students to turn in intermediate deliverables, thereby forcing them to actually start in week 2, not in week 5. Again, to me, that anecdote has stuck in my head because, again, I'm not kidding. In terms of labor that I invested in curricular redesign versus the impact that it had, that is the best deal in town. Best time I ever spent in my faculty days.
Cool.
So.
We're going to take a quick pause for station identification, as they say.
I want some ferns up here, though.
Well, we'll see. We can make these grow a little bit. And when we come back, I'm going to flip that coin over.
Sure.
We're going to talk about, administrative technology.
Please.
Right, in bolstering the academy. So thanks.
Awesome. Good to see Tom.
Okay.
It's Tom.
Welcome back. Thank you for that message from our sponsor, Sodexo, today. Thank you.
Look, man, if Sodexo's going to sponsor this, I want food.
That's all you got, Mountain Dew in your hand. So anyway, John, as I indicated, there's a lot going on the teaching and learning side of technologies today. But equally, we've been examining new technologies and done some work recently to kind of improve the administrative side of this thing, whether it's development of curriculum and tracking of that, or re-registration, so on and so forth. So let me just pitch the, broad open-ended question to you. What's going on in that space? What are you excited about, and what should we be looking at going forward?
I think we've gotten a lot of really value out of adopting technologies in a stronger way in the operational space. So, Course Dog, for example,
Yeah.
has really been a game changer for our course scheduling enterprise, and is now coming into the catalog management and curriculum management enterprise. I think that's going to help us move more quickly and again move more efficiently, of course, as well. Um, Again, this is a big space, so I'm just going to throw out top of mind for me.
Sure.
Um, and again, it's very similar to what I was sharing in terms of the LMS. Is how do we better use technology to gain operational awareness of what is happening out there? So, um, knowing where we're investing our effort as an institution in a better way, I think is going to become of greater importance. It already has been important, of course, but as we continue to operate in resource constrained environments, it's only going to grow in importance. So, and right now, one of the things that we're struggling with is not just how do we use technology to gain operational awareness in a more sophisticated, perhaps, way than running enterprise reports, which is often my go-to for what that's worth, but also thinking about making sure that that technology that we think is a source of truth is actually a source of truth. And that's a complicated intersection because I think we often, for example, a lot of universities have moved towards using, data layers to assess, instructional efficiency and faculty workload, to use some very bad words. But one of the challenges, of course, is that data and those technologies are only as good as the quality they use. So, and generally speaking, by the way, today, what is being presented is not the truth. And that has intersections with how do we schedule, how do we manage faculty workload. There's a lot of social, institutional culture types of considerations that we need to work through to make those technologies work for us. But, again, that notion of analytics and operational awareness and just knowing how the institution actually operates, which is both useful in terms of teaching administrators things that they didn't know about how the institution operates, and of course disabusing them of preconceived notions of how the institution operates. I think, yeah, administration is a deeply human game. So we all bring these perspectives, and again, biases perhaps is a good way to put it. And I think these technologies have a really powerful effect in helping us do a better job. So yeah, Academic Performance Solutions, for example, is a platform that we attempted to use for that purpose in a very specific way. It really didn't pan out for us the way that we had hoped.
Anything else exciting out there? I mean, as you think about the intersection of what you oversee at the university and technology, and you, unlike many other administrators at the university, right, having come out of a technology background, are both critical and, I think amplifying in some ways the potentials for technology. So just an open slate. I mean, what do you think? Where's this all going?
I don't know. let me just say that. Yeah, that's a tricky question. I mean, I'll confess that as I've been reflecting and thinking more deeply around online, and this intersects, of course, with LMS, but it also intersects with what I'll just maybe go back to my roots in, which is really information science and the way we organize and present information. I think we need to think more deeply about notions for supporting learning through technologies through better information organization and architecture. And again, of course, there's cultural and organizational threads there, right? For example, the notion of some layer of standardization and modular design around a course shell and how lessons are structured. I think we need to think more as an organization how we do more of that to, again, improve the student experience, not through some sort of administrative overreach.
Sure.
But we know that students operate better when one course looks kind of sort of like the other course. I think there's a cognitive overhead in trying to transition from one type of design to a separate type of design that we don't necessarily need to burden our students with. And we, of course, would also certainly benefit from things like that. Also tend to be easier to maintain and evolve.
And I think you alluded to it too. I mean, you said, you didn't get a lot of pedagogical training in your field, and then you're kind of thrown into your classroom with your students.
Yep.
And your course.
Poor students.
Which is, it's not, that's not, NAU is no different than most any other university that's out there, but coming together to lower that dissonance, that cognitive overhead, as you put it, does streamline it, and particularly importantly so for our increasing number of students who may be on the bubble. You and I mentioned the other day, right? I'm not too worried about the A students.
No, they're fine.
I'm not even really worried about the B students. It's the students on that CD bubble, right? Where if we can move 200 of them a year
Mhm.
to the upside of that finish line, we could make substantial improvements in, the number of degrees we're granting and retention
Yep.
and, on a fiscal balance sheet as well, right?
Absolutely.
But it's the right thing to do as well.
Yeah,
So,
it is part of our mission. And as we position ourselves as an institution to serve more of the underrepresented first generation, lower socioeconomic family backgrounds types of students, and we are, it becomes doubly important. And you're absolutely right. I joke that the A students never needed me. They were going to be A students no matter who was sitting in front of the classroom or who their faculty was. For those types of students, it becomes a do no harm type of exercise to be their teacher, to be their instructor. But yeah, for those students in the bubble, and that's the fulfilling part of faculty work for what that's worth. It's making that tipping point difference, and it's getting that student that might have been struggling to become successful. I think that's where the magic is, and for what it's worth, that's why I think most faculty are here doing the work that they do. Especially in the technological fields or industry opportunities, as I know is the case for your team, abound and tend to be a little bit more lucrative, let's put it that way, than the work that you do as an institution, but
not as rewarding.
Not as rewarding, not as fulfilling.
Yes, changing lives and affecting families and our communities in really, really profound ways, I think, right? One student at a time.
One student at a time. And I annoy our marketing folk every time I remind them that at least when I came in 08, our tagline was be the difference that matters. And I haven't let it go because for me, it actually captured what it felt like and what I at least think motivates our faculty to pursue is to be that difference. And that's where the magic is.
And that tagline scales from you and I as individuals to an entire institution, frankly. I'm right there with you. I appreciate it. One other topic, and then we're going to take some questions around there. You and I have both been on the Smart Campus Master Planning engagement exercise. What's exciting to you about all of that?
Yeah.
Just interested to have you share that kind of perspective as we move out into these community engagement forums coming up around that. What's the short of it? What jumps out at you as being really interesting?
Oh man, Steve, I'm not going to give you the answer you're hoping for.
It's okay.
No, I think it's been a great effort to be a part of, and first of all, to learn more about where we might be moving forward, just on the physical, but also technologically enabled physical infrastructure moving forward. So that's been a lot of fun. I think I'm keenly interested in notions of, and I'll tie that to operational awareness. What do our buildings look like? How do they function? How can we be more efficient, more environmentally conscious and sustainable? I think there's a lot of potential for technology to contribute to all of those functions. But honestly, if you're asking me what I'm most excited about, I'm really excited to see some movement and progress on a lot of our deferred maintenance needs. I happen to work with a staff team that is in not great physical spaces, I'll put it that way. And I also think we're, in some cases, doing a disservice to our students by the state of some of our facilities. So I'm excited to see change and improvement on that front. I hope to see a lot of new buildings come online, and I think we will.
And most importantly, some buildings that come down.
Oh,
We've got some really craptacular buildings out there with really craptacular classrooms.
Thanks for saying the stuff that I was hesitating to say, Steve. I appreciate it. Yeah, I don't know if there are students or former students out there. You know, Babbitt Academic Annex is not the best place to study and learn.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see some change there. And of course, I work with University Advising. So the Gateway Building is another one of those examples. Again, I'm excited to see us as an institution agree on and collaboratively decide to invest in improvements in this physical space.
Right. It is exciting to see. I may not live to see all of it come to fruition, but you know, it's definitely been a great exercise, and to, you know, kind of paint a canvas of the entire institution from lots of different perspectives, and to see the consensus points emerge around some of these classroom buildings and office spaces, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so thank you. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Let's turn and see what we've got out there in terms of questions, either here in our studio audience or out there in Zoom land. Well, Don, we can always count on Don Carter to be early and often on questions.
Thank you, Don.
So let's see, we've got something here in chat that he posted. In either academic or administrative areas, what would you like to see more highly adopted and better used? And two, from an information standpoint, what questions would you like to ask and get answered?
I mean, there I'd go back to the administrative side. I think for me, at least, that's the top of mind these days. My biggest pet peeve today is how do we make the schedule of classes be the source of truth for what the instructional enterprise at least looks like for the institution. I don't think we're there yet. I think there's a lot of heterogeneous unit culture and how things are scheduled that makes it very difficult to actually understand what is happening in a unit and what does the student experience look like just by looking at that schedule. So just the quality of that data layer isn't where it needs to be. And if that quality isn't there, then of course none of the technologies that might help visualize or better expose and generate insights out of that data set. So I guess it's a back to the basics types of answer, Don. It's if the data isn't good, the technologies that use that data aren't good. And at least today, I feel we need to invest a lot of effort in making sure the data is good.
Yeah.
And then we can go from there. And again, I think we can use that in a lot of different ways in what we do. And also as I reflect, and again, not to focus on course scheduling too much, the course schedule also has a really interesting interplay with space in the sense that where we schedule courses matters a lot for the student experience and the transportation corridors, especially the way our campus is shaped, right? So a perennial complaint, of course, of engineering students is, what do you mean I have to go all the way up to North Campus to take my English or my math or
Yeah.
my humanities
Yeah, I'm
classes?
an engineering student all day long in the engineering building. I have to run up to North Campus to get the queue.
That's right. And of course, again, that impacts the student experience. It impacts, there's a lot of powerful socialization and community and belonging work that happens in the in-betweeny space between classes, right? Those 20 minutes between classes, a lot of student community forms in that space. And to have to sort of step outside that community to run across campus and then to come back actually has, I think, a cost to it. It certainly has a traffic cost. It certainly has a sustainability cost. I don't know. I have this daydream of probably some kind of genetically algorithm optimized room assignment process that actually optimizes or minimizes student movement through campus. Now, of course, what that doesn't minimize, y'all, is faculty movement through campus.
Yeah.
But that's a different
You
conversation.
need a really deep learning, machine learning, ChatGPT enabled, tool for that.
Like, where should I schedule this class to minimize student travel?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what other
And I
questions.
need some developers, by the way, if anyone's interested.
That sounds like sales.
Yeah. Traveling, comment was, it sounds like a traveling salesman algorithm almost. And in fact, I'll tell you that at another university, we wrote an algorithm to optimize an advancement officer's travel. And we put it on their phone so they could schedule travel and optimize the time they spent with the donors that were most likely to give monies. So yeah, that was like 15 years ago.
Maybe I'm just getting too slow as I age and dodging the bikes that go up and down campus. So fewer, but seriously, no kidding. If we can, I think there would be a lot of benefits if we could somehow better optimize how students move through campus. Because again, we're shaped weirdly, and there are some inefficiencies that come out of our shape.
I've raised the question in the campus planning about what are we going to do about the 35-mile-an-hour scooters? And I'm just, if I can't beat them, I guess I'm going to join them. I'm going to be a boomer on a scooter.
Just make sure yours is faster. So we're gonna juice it up.
Any questions here in the room? Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, got one. I'm not sure if it's a question or more of a thought, but going back to the generative AI learning tool, at least with my limited experience playing with the ChatGPT and Bard and those types of things, is the frequency with which they're wrong, and where the professor and more likely TA's role is going to be in correcting students when they come and say, it told me, the AI told me this is how I solved this problem and I got the wrong answer.
Yeah. So that role of faculty, as I equate it, and I've been calling it in certain CIO circles, we need that service that's like the old good housekeeping seal of approval. Somebody who can kind of test the efficacy and accuracy of all these generative technologies, right? And put some kind of assessment on top of it, because it truly is, to a large degree, garbage in, garbage out. And when you're ingesting the entire internet, even though Abraham Lincoln said it had to be true because it was on the internet, doesn't always necessarily mean that that's correct. And it made up sources for me when I was doing a very serious research question, and I'm thinking, oh wow, I'm all excited about these resources. I spent hours looking for those resources, only to come to the conclusion that they didn't exist. So it's an excellent point, John. What are your thoughts about faculty's role or the general consequences of having to pull the thread on the sweater, so to speak?
I think certainly faculty have an important role to play as quality control, quality assurance, at least today. I guess what I'm supposing is happening is these tools are geared to, if you can't know something for sure, you make it up, right? Don't tell anyone, by the way, but faculty occasionally do a little bit of that too. Not incorrectly, hopefully, of course, right? But there's always gaps, really knowledge, and exposing those gaps is sometimes difficult. But so yeah, certainly today, I think that's the case. But I also anticipate that's going to get better, at least. And I don't know how well these technologies will continue to scale. You know, I'm certainly seeing some conversation in specialist communities that suggest that maybe Chat GPT underlying text and algorithms, this is maybe about as good as they get, right? And in some ways, of course, I hope that's the case. But I think as the training happens in a more specialized way, and as I alluded to, I think that's what Chegg is trying to do,
Right.
or is aspiring to do in many ways. That making up and that just erroneous, factually incorrect type of information may likely decrease. And again, in some spaces, faculty are going to be able to identify those errors and correct them. Now, as we move up maybe that level of sophistication, it's going to be harder and harder. Like you mentioned, some research-based uses of these tools. The closer we move to the bleeding edge, so to speak, the harder it becomes for a faculty to actually be sufficiently authoritative to be able to recognize errors. And then, of course, we generate knowledge that we then train on. So if we're generating not good, then we're training on not good, which institutionalizes the errors and in some cases just factually incorrect.
One of my podcasts talked about weaponizing generative AI, in that you can do it today, is you can seed false information. If you know what the model's ingesting, you can seed false information to create whatever bias you're wanting to create. And so, well, ChatGPT had a wow factor to it, right? I think that was part of announcing it and getting it out there was, to kind of get people thinking and having these conversations. There's a business model that pulls back and says, okay, well, now let's just limit the ingestion of, factual medical data, for example, is an example I was using, right? And disclosing the sources of that information that's in the model and what's importantly not in the model, perhaps, to give that. And, companies will do that and charge really exorbitant rates for that knowledge because, again, it's a shortcut for a lot of people who are on the cutting edge of advanced research.
And especially in the medical field, we are actually seeing some pretty decent diagnostic outcomes come out of appropriately trained models. And of course, we had those back in the day. I haven't studied this field, but in the 80s, we had rule-based expert systems.
That's right.
Engage in diagnostic work, and they were pretty good too. What they weren't very good at is running efficiently and producing answers quickly. So I think one of the things that we've optimized here is speed of response, even if in some cases that response is incorrect. There's a lot of power there.
Yeah, I can remember writing lots of Lisp code back in the day to approximate AI.
Yeah.
Anyway, Todd Firth has this question. John, what is your personal perception of students and faculty tolerance for a fail fast, early mindset, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a good question, Todd. I think generally speaking, faculty, but also not to speak for this organization or for our internal ITS team specifically, but I think generally speaking, there's a little bit of waterfalliness to still in how we approach the technical work. I think that's certainly the case in how faculty think about this space. There's a lot of desire and demand for upfront design. Let's figure out all of the possible use cases, even if they're the edgiest of the edgy. And let's do all of that work upfront. And of course, what that causes us to do is delay the launch of solutions. And I'd love to become a little bit more agile in that space, but it's proving very, very difficult. So yeah, launch early, fail if you fail, and then fix it and move forward. That, generally speaking, is not a very strong part of our DNA. I think it's changing a little bit slowly over time. I think we're becoming a little bit more open to experimentation and failure. Generally speaking, academic institutions and academicians, to speak of them as individuals, are risk averse. Yeah, risk tolerance is very, very, very low. And it's because we focus on what could the worst possible outcome be. And of course, we almost never see the worst possible outcome actually materialize. But it's a part of our institutional culture that I really wish we could all get together.
And you know, I think NAU is a risk averse institution as compared to maybe ASU. And you know, I've had some opportunity to spend some time with Dr. Crow and his staff over the last weeks and months, and you can see there's a very different attitudinal approach to things, right? And they are more risk tolerant, and they do take a lot more risks, partially because they can. When you've got $1 billion budget, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't want to dismiss the importance of institutional culture. So your homework assignment, because I've missed assigning homework, so trying to do it in as many possible contexts as I can, is I think it was the 1932 graduation address that FDR offered to Oglethorpe College. There's a passage there that I'm really fond of that talks about, you know, experiment. If something doesn't work, admit it freely and try something else. But above all, like, try and do something. And I'm very loosely paraphrasing, of course. But again, generally speaking, we don't do that. We fear failure because in some cases we tend to over penalize failure. That's not smart.
And I'll just comment, we'll move on to the next question. But ironically, that's how we set up most of our pedagogies, right? Is for students to fail at a particular math problem and keep failing until they learn it right. And, you know, so there's some real irony in all that, I think, from a higher education standpoint. So Jamie has a question. What are both your perspectives on how tech evolution will morph IT work?
I'm gonna cede the first answer slot to you, my friend.
Okay, well, I think, you know, the tech evolution is in some ways, right, it's not getting simpler, it's getting more complicated. It gives us the illusion of simplicity at perhaps some level, right, to plug and play technologies, standards and whatnot. But the reality is it's getting a lot more complex. And, you know, any little thing, an API failing, a certificate not working, you know, even the fact that, you know, Microsoft had a major issue this morning with office.com, right? All see complexities into our IT work. And I think, you know, a couple of the net effects of that, of course, is we will see more technologies that allow us to go from, you know, deep coding, as most of us grew up on, to low coding, to no coding. But it still doesn't absolve us of the necessity of understanding how the technology works and engaging our stakeholders in the requirements of what technology needs to do for them to be successful. And those are increasingly complex conversations. And I think, you know, all of us have to be generalists in some way, shape, or form. I don't care what your role is in IT. There's a lot of overlap in the job roles, and the necessity for all of us to be cybersecurity experts, for example, or coding experts or scripting. You know, we need to be script kiddies in some way, shape, or form. And to understand, you know, not to beat the horse today, but to understand, you know, what goes into a generative AI algorithm, right? And ask the critical questions about that kind of stuff, so we can answer those questions for our stakeholders and participants. So that's my quick response.
I'm not sure I can augment that. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the top of the hour, and John, I just want to thank you again for, you know, coming here and putting your thoughts and ideas out for us to share. All of this informs our strategic planning, and a lot of rich conversations, I'm sure, will stem from this. Again, thank you, everybody, for tuning in out there in ITS land via Zoom. Thanks to our local audience for being a great captured audience today.
Yeah, I'm almost sure you guys had to be there, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, right. And we'll see you again on another Tech Talk. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. And thanks for the work you do. I know it's a lot.